Hello and welcome to episode 3 of It's Personal, the podcast which explores how to put the citizen at the heart of public service design. I'm Jess, the editor of Civil Service World.
And I'm Jo, a partner in the customer transformation practice at KPMG.
And we've got a jam-packed episode for you today, full of different voices. Who are we hearing from today, Jo?
Well, in the studio today, we're lucky enough to have Kate Caulkin join us, who, after a 30-year career in the civil service, now heads up People and Operational Management Insights at the National Audit Office.
Also coming up in this episode, we are going to be hearing from Keith White, who is Head of Digital Experience at Northern Trains, and he's going to tell us how an immersive theatrical experience organised by KPMG inspired him to think differently about rail passengers. But before we hear any of those voices, let's meet our guest properly. Kate, tell us how you came to be working at the NAO and tell us about your hinterland in the civil service.
Yeah, sure. So I don't think I chose the civil service. I'm not sure the civil service chose me either, but I think it was very similar to other people. I was 16 and I thought, actually, I'd really like to earn some money and do some work. So I was offered 2 jobs. One was in a combined court centre and the other one was drawing maps. The drawing maps one, I thought I can't do that all day, not realising that actually that was civil service as well.
A cartography role, you don't hear about those much.
But yeah, chose the combined court centre and started off in operational delivery. I was at Wandsworth County Court for a number of years. One of my favourite roles there was as listing officer, working with the judiciary. I think that's probably where I got my negotiation skills. So yeah, great role, and was sort of deputy court manager there for a number of years as well. So definitely started in operational delivery, moved to Revenue and Customs. I was at Revenue and Customs for 10 years doing a mix of programme project delivery, but went to the Cabinet Office after that. I did EU exit capability and capacity, worked on learning platforms, recruitment platforms, and then I was lucky to do a very short stint at the Department for Exiting the EU as the Corporate Centre Director. That was fantastic. Was at DCMS as HR Director for a little while and then stepped in at DFT for a short period as Group HR Director. And then this role came up at the NAO, and I suppose I'd see myself as having a bit of a unique background of operational delivery and HR. So people and operational management insights sounded like a great thing to do. Yeah, absolutely enjoying it. I mean, I just have a passion for public sector and really helping government improve is what we do. So sharing our unique insights of what we see across government and try and help government improve for the better and for the citizen.
So I want to ask what you've been focusing on for the last few months. But before I do that, what advice would you give to your 16-year-old self or a 16-year-old thinking about joining the public sector?
Go for it, I suppose. Yeah, I think there are so many different roles and so many different professions. I mean, we didn't have professions when I started that. Try it out, because actually if you start in policy, if you don't like it, you can move into project delivery. You know, there's just such a variation, so many different things you can do, and you're making a difference, right? You're making a difference for the citizen.
That's great to hear. So what about the last few months?
So the last few months, so on my operational delivery side, which is where we've focused most of our discussion today, that's where we did our lessons learnt report on operational delivery, so better services. So please do take a look at that. But on the people side, we've done quite a lot of work on leadership in government, and we did a workforce report looking at pay, recruitment and performance management. Performance management is always a topic hot topic. So we did look at poor performance within that report, but found some data gaps across government in relation to that.
So as you know, one of our themes in this podcast series is to make sure that we're listening to the voice of citizens, real people. You're now going to hear 3 people talk about their experiences, some good, some not so good. And again, we're going to reflect on those and what they mean in terms of public sector strategy, transformation, continuous improvement.
With my doctors, I used to have to wait in the queue on the telephone for what felt like forever and a day. You have to ring at 8 o'clock on the dot and you're always like 20, 30 down the line in the queue. By the time someone answers, all the appointments are gone. But now they have a triage service which you can do online. So you put in what your concern is, you can add photographs, and someone at reception or something will look through it, give you a call, say, right, this is the situation, we're going to get the doctor to call you, or we'll text you. And sometimes they will text you, like this week myself, or last week, sorry, I had it where they just text me and said, right, this is our advice. You don't have to do anything further. But it was just that peace of mind that a doctor has seen it, a doctor has assessed it and said, right, okay, it's fine. There's no worry. So I think that's a lot better. Whereas previously I would probably just go weeks. If I'm ill, I'm like, it is what it is, because I'm not going to get to speak to anyone anytime soon. So if I am gone to work, I'm like, right, I know they're going to call or text or whatever, but I'm not sat there whilst I'm supposed to be working, waiting for them to pick up, and then that's stopping me from doing other things throughout the day. So yeah, it definitely makes me feel a lot less stressed, and I'm just like, right, I can get on with my day.
In terms of things that have improved, not too sure when this came out, but I came across the NHS app during COVID. It was nice to actually know that there's an app where I could go look at my details and stuff about the NHS. And I did not actually have to call someone for certain information. So yeah, I felt that was an improvement. I felt that was a step into the right direction of using digital services.
Well, recently I've had quite an upset with the council over our council tax, because I was living with my son, who's an adult but on the autistic spectrum. Then I moved out, and the council managed to, somewhat bizarrely, refund him the full amount that he'd paid, but at the same time issue him with a threatening letter in very incomprehensible English, asking him to pay it all back. And because he's on the autistic spectrum, he doesn't do phone calls. I phoned up to try and sort it out. We are still in the process, because then he has to write a letter saying that I can speak on his behalf, and I've sent that off, but the council doesn't seem to have received that yet. But what was really bad, and the reason that I felt nobody was being listened to, was because I'd explained that my son gets really upset when he gets these threatening letters, because he thinks he's done something seriously wrong. And, you know, could they just lay off while we were trying to sort it out? And they know that I'm trying to sort it out because we've sent the letter off. And he phoned me again today saying he'd got another threatening letter from the council, and he gets quite upset about it. So I thought that was just a really unfortunate example where somebody who's quite vulnerable doesn't get support because there just doesn't seem to be a system whereby the council can take actions when you tell them something. I think the issue is that different people have different ways that they want to communicate. Somebody might need something in easy English. They might not use the telephone but prefer email, and that sort of information, the moment you put their name in, because before the council send you anything they have to put your name in, some sort of flag should pop up, and that just doesn't seem to happen because they keep on making the same mistake.
Wow, there's so much to get our teeth into in all three of those experiences. Kate, before I come to you, because I'm assuming that a lot of what we have just heard chimes with the themes of your work at the NAO, I just wanted to add that the man who discovered his data was actually on the NHS app really resonated with me, because I made a similar discovery recently. I opened it to renew some prescriptions, which in itself is an amazing advance. It feels like you don't have to go to your doctor anymore, and they just get sent to your pharmacy. It's brilliant. But I also saw that my entire immunisation record dating back to the early 80s was also on there. Fair enough, some of them did say 1986 immunisation. It's like, okay, that's not very specific, but, you know, it's still helpful. So I was very, very impressed with that. But Kate, tell us what you thought as you were listening to those voices.
Yeah, so obviously great experience for the first two, not so much for the last person. So the thing that jumped out to me straight away was three areas of our work, really. So failure demand, how you deal with diverse set of customers, particularly vulnerable customers, and taking a whole system approach. So perhaps I'll talk about failure demand first of all.
Yeah, could you just say what failure demand means to those who might not be familiar?
So this is essentially, I'm sure you would have heard of getting it right first time. Put the effort into ensuring you've got a quality service up front and get it right first time. Where that doesn't happen, that's what we call failure demand. So that's all the chase ups and the calls that happen afterwards. It's just not efficient. People that are working in the service don't like doing it either. You know, they really want to get it right. That was one of the areas that definitely jumped out.
I think that's a really interesting point, because when we say service, I think our mindsets, particularly of a certain generation, automatically go to a human intervention. Whereas in today's society, service could mean that that person is self-serving and taking a lot of that failure demand out of the system, and being able to predict and anticipate what channel the customer, the citizen wants to come through is a really good area to explore when it comes to failure demand.
Absolutely, Jo. And that just moves me on to the customers and segmenting customers, however you want to describe it, but really understanding who your vulnerable customers are. So our work on smarter delivery was covered at a Public Accounts Committee hearing on Monday. And actually there was a really fantastic discussion there in terms of vulnerable customers and how you need to look at which channel you're using to support them in delivery. And that jumps out here, you know, asking someone to write a letter when they're on the phone just doesn't seem efficient, does it? And you're not helping them there and then with their issue. So that's what you really need to think about, is how can I best help this customer? Yeah, there might be people that actually phone up, want a bit of reassurance, and you can talk them through perhaps a digital solution, and that's fine, and help them do that once, and then next time they won't ring you. But I think in this instance, the person should have really been helped over the phone rather than being asked to write in separately.
And being able to anticipate those needs through the lens of that segment is really important.
Kate, there were loads of really interesting themes from that. And I think a lot of the MPs on that committee, their questions were based on the NAO's report on operational delivery and smarter working. And one of the themes that came up in that hearing was managing demand. And I was really interested by the idea of seasonal demand and whether you could say a bit more about that and how public services for the citizen could be improved if government gets on top of this idea of peaks and troughs in their workflow.
Yep, sure. So a lot of the discussion around the seasonal peaks and troughs was an approach that government have taken in terms of, they call it the Surge and Rapid Response Team, which is a team of individuals who are operational delivery experts, and they will go into any department, any organisation in the civil service and support with those seasonal peaks in demand. However, we would still want departments to be looking at, why are those peaks happening, and is there anything that we can do within the processes, within the policy, to actually smooth those peaks over the year so that there aren't quite so many. So I think some good ways for responding to it now, but actually in terms of good capability, what are you doing within your processes and to ensure that that doesn't happen as often? The other area that really sprung out was a whole system approach here. So when we think of whole system, we normally think about departments working together. Immigration, for example, in the Home Office, actually, if they become more efficient and are dealing with lots of cases, potentially there could be more appeals that end up in the courts. So they really need to work closely with the Ministry of Justice to ensure that they are joined up in relation to that work and how it will be managed end to end when you think about the citizen that's within that process. But also, and I think this example here in the local authority, sometimes this can just happen within organisations where teams within organisations aren't working together and understanding what another team has done. And obviously I don't know exactly what happened in this scenario, but it sounds as though it might have been not quite right join up within the own organisation as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of the feedback that we're hearing about how you personalise services really rings true with that third story, and how you do take a step back and think about the end-to-end design and the join up on that. But again, a lot of the feedback that we've heard since we launched our report earlier in the year around remember me, recognise me and respect me. And a lot of people are saying to us, we absolutely get that concept, but how do we actually make that happen? So if you take that third specific example around accessibility and personalisation, that's really hard to achieve in a local authority. You know, they're financially strapped for cash. Doing whole system design is very challenging. So one way of going about doing that is to break that down, particularly around failure demand, because all that will have happened in that local authority was triggering a series of calls as it did to sort it out. So that's going to cost them even more money. So what can local authorities do more locally within specific parts of their service?
So I also said at the top of the episode that we were going to hear from Keith White, who is Head of Digital Experience at Northern Trains. And we heard from him in a rather unique setting which was at an immersive event in the Banksy Tunnel organised by KPMG in the summer. Jo, can you tell us a bit more about that event before we hear from Keith?
Sure. So every year we launch our Citizen Experience Excellence Research, and that could be a boring report. And actually, we do have a boring report that people still enjoy reading. And it could be a 50-page PowerPoint deck. Equally, we've got the PowerPoint decks, but we feel very strongly that to connect people with citizen purpose, we need to bring that research to life. So the way that we do that is that we recreate the insights that we learn, as well as the voices of citizens through dramatised performances, through the lens of citizen, through the lens of civil servants, and through the lens of what we called a protagonist, which was a person that was essentially agitating on some of the key themes around remember, recognise and respect.
Yeah.
So we had 70 people in a tunnel underneath Waterloo enjoying an acted experience.
Great. And I think, Kate,
I was
couldn't make
very,
it.
very sad not to make it. I had a wedding because I would have loved to have gone along. I think using storytelling is such a powerful way of getting messages across. So I should be going to the next one.
Yeah, I was there. It was bonkers, but brilliant. And I think Keith was also quite inspired by the theatrical performance. So let's hear what he had to say now.
So the performance made me feel actually quite energised about the possibilities that we have for really improving the way in which we interact with our customers right across the public sector. But if I think of where I'm based, in the transport sector with Northern Trains, we carry nearly 100 million passengers a year. That's a lot of people going to a lot of places for lots of different reasons, whether that's for hospital appointments, to see their family, days out, commuting for work. If we can just know a little bit more about why they travel and what it is they're travelling, we can do a little bit more for them in the times of disruption, the times when perhaps we're letting them down. But we can make them feel valued because we understand the impact it's having on their lives. I think the way in which tonight's made me think about taking action is to really focus on the things that matter to our customers, to make sure that we really are responding to the moments, whether that's the pain points, moments that matter. But ultimately, it's what we really need to focus on is the ways in which we interact with individuals and how we improve the quality of life that we can engender for them. Again, going back to transport, we can get people home on time. We can get people to their hospital appointments on time. We can get them to their family on time. We can even get them to a Kylie concert at Manchester Arena on time. And even more importantly, we can get them home again afterwards. But when we fail in those moments, we've really got to understand the impact it's having on lives. It's not just a train full of people who are delayed 15 minutes. If your average journey, and the average journey on a Northern train is maybe about 30 minutes. If you're delayed 15 minutes, that's half your journey time. Delayed 15 minutes on LNR going back to Leeds tonight, well, do you know what? I was going to take 2 hours, 15 minutes anyway. 15 minutes is no big deal. But it really is a big deal. If you're going to hospital, you're going to see your grandmother, or you're trying to get to a Kylie concert, or you're trying to get home and with the last train. We've really got to think about what that means and how we deliver service, understanding the impact on the customer. I think the advice I would give to other public sector leaders, it's the same advice I probably would have given before tonight, but emphasised with some of the examples we had tonight. Don't let perfect get in the way of getting stuff done. That's the key thing. It's so easy when you're thinking about how we can use AI, how we can use data, how we can join things up, to think we have to design the perfect system. But the reality is we're delivering services to people right now with imperfect systems. What we've got to do is incrementally improve them and think about the ways in which that has an impact on the customer. So we might want to define the end state, but we might also want to think about how we can start to get there. So we work backwards. Oh, there's the golden future. How does we get there? Well, we start somewhere. The journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. Let's actually start that step. Let's start improving things with people that we've got now. And let's get feedback from them. Let's involve the citizen, involve the customer in the conversation about how we do things better. And that way, we'll design steps which will get us somewhere, which might not be where we thought we were going to go, but might be where the customer wants to be. And let's do that. I think that's the most important thing we can take away.
Great reflections from Keith there, and we were so delighted he was able to attend. A couple of things that jumped out at me around being purposeful and thinking about knowing your customers through that purposeful lens rather than them just being passengers. It was great. But then that last point that you touched on around incremental improvement and that dynamic intention that we see happening so often in public sector around evolution? Do you chip away to make a difference? Or revolution? Do you go big on transformation? Is a debate that we have most days with our clients. Kate, what's your view and what's the research telling us?
You need both, right? But the one that I'll focus on is those incremental improvements. And this is the focus of our report. So, the NAO looks at services in government all the time, and it's really, really difficult. And there's real challenges in terms of operational delivery. But even in these adverse circumstances, there's teams in government that are trying to continuously improve all the time and to innovate. And that's what our report does. There's over 20 case examples of where teams have tried to do this in government. And I think one of the key things is, how do you share that? First of all, how do you find the space and time for the teams to have time to innovate and think about how they can improve the services? And then how do you share that both within the department, but more importantly, across government? And that's where the operational delivery profession can help in terms of sharing those stories across government and hopefully improving for the citizen.
And Kate, I know that the NAO's job is to scrutinise and to hold government's feet to the fire, but have you got any sort of favourite examples of best practice of innovation or incremental improvements, or just where operational delivery is going really well? Because I think, as we were saying, it's really important to share the good stuff, to share the wins and the successes, as well as talk about the failures.
Yeah, definitely. So let me just talk about an example that's in our report, first of all, from Revenue and Customs. Mm-hmm. And this is really around leadership and management. So leadership and management underpins everything that we recommend in our report. And HMRC noticed that actually, to ensure people are coming forward with their ideas, with their innovation, it's the managers and leaders that need to encourage them to do that. So they've implemented a specific capability building program for team leaders. And this is team leaders that have 12 to 15 people within their direct reports, and they go on a workshop and they're basically taught the skills, particularly coaching skills, in terms of how they can help their people think about improvements to their processes.
Which is really good when you look at some of the disempowerment that happens in public sector, and a lot of frontline team managers expressing their levels of concern around not being empowered to make that difference with their team. So that's really great to hear what they've been doing now.
So let me give you a specific example of an improvement. So again, you can read this in our report. The Home Office had to design and implement the electronic travel authorisation scheme. This was a new mechanism for how non-visa nationals must apply to come to the UK. The important thing here is they formed a multidisciplinary team. How often do we hear about policy being formed in one area, and then when it goes over to the operational delivery team, there's problems? So this team was policy, operational, digital, project delivery. Great, brought everyone together, used the learning from the new EU settlement scheme, and they basically designed a new service that's fully automated, and 97% of users can access that through a digital app. And then obviously still thinking about those customers that perhaps can't use the digital channel. But a great example of working together in various different skills and really designing that approach for the users.
And I think that could be summarised in another buzzword that's happening across government right now, which is service ownership. That's exactly what service ownership is all about. It's about being accountable for all aspects of service delivery, and that includes policy. It's about working in a multidisciplinary way. It's about being customer-centric, citizen-centric from the get-go. But it's also about being able to continuously iterate and improve while you're doing that. And you can only do that if you've got every player in the room.
Absolutely. Kate, we've talked earlier, you told us about your long storied career in government with lots of HR roles under your belt as well. Can you talk a bit more about the importance of leadership and management when it comes to getting the best outcomes for citizens?
Yeah, of course. And this really is about what's the culture in the organisation. You know, what do we reward? What do we see people being praised for? And that very much comes from the leadership in the organisation and leadership throughout the organisation. So you definitely want your perm sec or your chief exec to be encouraging this, but also particularly in the operational delivery profession, there's leaders throughout, isn't there? It's how they can support people, and particularly how they support people in terms of test and learn is something we hear across government at the moment. So actually, if you're test and learning and it doesn't work, what happens? What happens next? What do you celebrate?
Kate, it's been so interesting hearing your thoughts today. Just before we wrap up the episode, I wonder if you've got one insight or one takeaway for our listeners who might be working in the operational delivery profession, what would that be?
So I think we've talked a lot today about listening to the citizen and a customer-centric approach. But actually, my key takeaway is listen to the people that are delivering these services, give them the opportunity to share their ideas, because they're the people that really know how this works in practice. So yeah, that's my key takeaway, is find the space and time to listen to the people delivering the services too.
Brilliant. I think that's a great note to end on. Unfortunately, that is all we've got time for today. Thank you so much to Kate Caulkin. And to our listeners, do make sure that you add us to your podcast feed, and do get in touch with any thoughts, experiences or questions that you'd like to share.
And you can do that by dropping me or Jess a message on LinkedIn.
Or by emailing csw.editor@civilserviceworld.com.
Thank you so much, folks, for listening to It's Personal, and we'll see you next time for episode 4.